It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it is time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Operator Hwayoung, or as the video calls her, Arunka, the person who supposedly uses the Autumn Sword. I also want to give my 2 cents on the new equipment sets, the protection set as well as the Torrent set. I want to talk about the dual attack changes as well as the Unity set changes in this video. And finally, I also want to talk about the changes to Battle Frenzy for the upcoming World Arena season because, yeah, someone actually decided that we needed those set of changes. Regardless of all that, we're going to do a deep dive, talk about Arunka here. First and foremost, all of the sets. Do I think she's viable? What do I think of the kit? And so on and so forth. With all of that introduction stuff out of the way, let's just jump into her S3 animation.
Even if the whole world's against us, no one shall lay their hands on the prairie as long as I stand. You seem quite strong. Maybe it's time to warm up. Am I getting that much better than everyone else?
Alright, you guys already know how we do it here in these videos. In the English dub of Epic 7, Arunka is voiced by Erika Ishii. She is a voiceover artist who is most famous for playing the character Valkyrie in Apex Legends, but you can also hear her in other games such as Cyberpunk 2077. Taking a look at her actual stats, she is an Earth Warrior of the Scorpio zodiac symbol. That means she has the same exact stat line as Rem from the ReZero collab. Taking a look at her stats, she has 1570 attack, although this is misleading. This is due to her S2 passive Wild Instinct that we'll be talking about in just a moment. Her health is 6,488, 102 base speed, 616 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 3% dual attack chance. This is due to the system changes to dual attacks that we'll be talking about later on in this video, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. Imprint release is health percentage for the team, and concentration, predictably, is attack percentage because she is a damage dealer and people want to hit with her as hard as possible. In the past, I was a big fan of this stat line for Rem, but that's because she was allowed to stay at base speed most of the time in order to just reap the benefits of the counters, which means that you were allowed to kind of really lean into that reasonable health and defense stat on the character. I don't really know if that's going to be possible with Arunka. She has no survivability mechanics in her kit, and the mechanic that they're using to supplement her low speed, while decent, I don't know if it is enough. Enough with my speculating though, let's actually just jump in and show you the actual skills themselves. Starting with the aforementioned S2 passive, Wild Instinct. It increases the attack of Arunka by 30%, but as a trade-off, she cannot trigger a critical hit. We've seen this part of a passive before on characters like Senya, Hwayoung, and Summertime Asaria, so this should be no new territory for most of you veteran players. At the end of an enemy's turn, when the target is granted a barrier, increases the combat radius of Arunka by 5 to 10%, depending on Malagora. This skill should tell you everything you need to know about Arunka as a character. She is designed to punish barrier characters a la Desert Jewel Basar and Operator Sigret, hence the first half of the Operator Hwayoung joke from the opening. And both of those characters are Moonlight 5 stars. This one's an RGB 5 star, so for a lot of you guys watching this video, this character is probably going to feel like a godsend because you probably don't have Desert Jewel Basar, you don't have Operator Sigret, and you are looking to get in on that sweet, sweet barrier punishing action. I think the strangest thing about this character coming out with this style of passive is that it's in the same patch as the protection set. Normally, in card games or live service games like this one, or gacha games in general, they bring something out and then they sell you the solution like 4 to 8 weeks down the line. These guys are speedrunning it and literally doing it in the same patch. People already are not enthusiastic about farming Golem, so putting a barrier set in Golem normally would seem like a good idea, but then you just literally gave everyone a barrier punishing unit like the Arunka that we're talking about in the same patch. But I digress. Moving on, let's talk now about her S3, which is a Thrashing in the Prairie. You acquire 3 souls upon use and has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Before you unleash this single target attack, Arunka will increase her attack for 2 turns. If an enemy is defeated by this skill, it will inflict extinction. The move in general penetrates 70% of the target's defense, and when the target is granted a barrier, it will increase the damage dealt. Really, really strong single target nuke. If you've watched any of my content, you already know 50% defense penetration, as I say all the time, is no joke. It does a lot of damage. 70% is very high. That is what Shu has on her S2 currently with Whoosh. So expect this move to hit for, 15, 20k damage. Might even be able to one-shot a lot of characters in the game, which is why people are making the joke that they just made a remixed Hwayoung for Arunka, because the S3 is probably going to do an absolute massive amount of damage. Arunka is still a warrior, which means you can still play Uberius' Tooth on her, and she's probably going to do a ton of bonus damage as a result, because you do get the attack buff that Hwayoung didn't have. Hwayoung had a cleanse, but still had crazy multipliers on the S3. We have to wait and see what the multipliers on this one are, but when you consider that it is a character that's already going to have very high base attack, somewhere probably around 6,000, giving them an attack buff and then also giving them a 70% defense penetration move means it's probably going to hit like a truck if it has a reasonable multiplier and they didn't just completely gut it, knowing what they now know about Hwayoung, for example. And assuming that the target has a barrier, you will get that damage increase. If it's a huge damage increase, then yeah, it's probably going to be a one-shot. This character is probably going to function very, very similar to Operator Cigarette. You bring her into teams where you know the opponent has a barrier. You use S3 here, a Thrashing in the Prairie, and just completely delete a character that has a barrier. That's really, really strong. Makes her at least a niche counterpick unit in PvP, or at least a very good Guild War offense character if you suspect that the enemy team is playing something with a barrier. Because there are a lot of characters in this game that have barriers. We obviously know about Fallen Cecilia and Hwayoung, who's probably going to drop off and play because of nerfs, but there is still like characters like DN is one, and even Conquer Aloyus. You guys might not remember this, but Conquer Aloyus gives herself a barrier on her S2, and she also gives an ally on her team a barrier as well if they have the highest amount of HP. So you can kind of game AI Conquer Aloyuses that go S3, S2 at the start of a fight. You can kind of bring Arunka into that, assuming she doesn't get controlled or picked off, and just destroy either the Conquer Aloyus herself or the character on the team that has the highest HP, for example, say maybe like a Shu. So that is something you can definitely do with this character. So I think that the character, just based off of the S3 and how it is designed, is worth pulling for. She is not a bad character by any means. I just don't know how viable she's going to end up being in World Arena, because I feel like Desert Jewel Bazaar and Operator Cigarette are still a bit better than this character. But if the multipliers on this character are just stupid, like Hwayoung's were before her nerf, then maybe Arunka is a character that sees a lot of play because it just outright dunks characters off the rip. Maybe this is a character we bring into Senya, because Senya does now give herself a barrier, and we could just use her to just destroy Senya outright. Again, got to see the multipliers. If the damage multiplier is like absolutely ludicrous, then that's going to be great. One of the biggest problems Operator Cigarette has as a character is her low base attack. Arunka attack should not be a problem. Like, we're going to probably have about 6,000 attack on this character when all is said and done. So I don't assume that attack is going to be the issue. If anything, it's going to be damage multipliers at the end of the day. Moving on to her S1 dagger throw here. I think this is the most disappointing skill in the entire kit. And now you're probably wondering, why am I saying that? So the S3, a Thrashing in the Prairie, is her basically going beast mode and dunking on somebody with her fists. If you guys remember, Arunka is the wielder of the Autumn Sword. You know, the 4 magical swords that basically are the most important part of all of Episode 4. The entirety of Episode 4's narrative is just built around these 4 swords. Ran has one of the swords, Aiden has one, so on and so forth. The whole narrative is built around how powerful these swords are. And Arunka, a character with 2 attack skills, one is her dunking on people with her fists, and now the S1 is her literally throwing a knife. The Autumn Sword user doesn't even really use the Autumn Sword. These all-powerful swords, she doesn't even really need it or use it. And that, to me, is a flavor fail. As somebody who actually enjoys lore in the games that they're playing, why the hell does this character not use the sword on the base S1 skill or the S3. Yes, you'll get it on the backup component of the S1 that we'll talk about in a second, but that still feels, like an afterthought. It was kind of like we designed the character and realized, oh crap, the Autumn Sword user doesn't use the Autumn Sword. We better fix that. Anyways, talking about the actual skill now itself. Throws a dagger at the enemy with a 50% chance to inflict 2 bleeding effects for 2 turns. A successful attack has a 50% chance to activate Expose as an extra attack. Expose can only be activated once on the caster's turn. This skill literally screams, man, we messed up with Hwayoung, because if you remember, whether or not Hwayoung actually hit a target, she still got the bonus effect on her S1. This one only now works on a successful attack, meaning that if you use it on characters like Remnant Violet or Violet, it's not going to proc. You actually do have to hit those characters to get the Expose. Obviously, this means that she is a bit worse into things like Blind now because you can't really get the Expose. So that kind of sucks. It's pretty standard compared to some other S1s in the game. Baiken, for example, gives 2 bleeds on an S1. It's fine. The biggest thing here, obviously, the biggest draw is the extra attack, the Expose here. Expose attacks the enemy and recovers health of the caster. Amount recovered increases proportional to the caster's attack. We have to see how much lifesteal is actually on this thing. If it's like a small amount, then it's probably still fine. If it's a huge amount, that's obviously great. Again, really have to see. The biggest question marks for this character for me are pretty much this Expose. How much health am I getting back? And how relevant is the combat readiness push on the S2? Because the character in general just has all right health, all right defense, very low speed, and no solid way, no hard way to save themselves in a situation from getting picked off. So these things right here, to me, are going to do the most heavy lifting. The character, if it gains a lot of health back on this S1 follow-up, or the S2 gives a lot of combat readiness, it procs more often than I'm thinking, then the character is going to be very, very good. Otherwise, where it stands, I think she's probably just a niche counter pick character that is third in line behind Desert Jewel Basar and Operator Sigrat. The Soul Burn effect here makes it so that you have a 100% chance to activate Expose at the cost of 10 souls. Obviously, this is going to be good. It's very akin to, say, like an Illinav, so that way you don't have to deal with the RNG and just get the guaranteed follow-up anyway. What it doesn't specify here is it says there's a 100% chance to activate. Does that still proc even on a miss? So right here, you only have the chance to proc Expose on a successful attack. Does that same clause apply to the Soul Burn effect? I would assume it doesn't, because at this point, Soul Burns feel very, very strong. And they know that if people are going to be spending their souls on anything, it better be worth it. It's probably that way, but it's still a question to ask and something to test for sure when the character actually comes out. Moving on now to her artifact. It is Sword of Autumn Eclipse. It is an artifact that increases the attack of all allies by 5% and increases the hit chance of the caster by 10 to 20% based on artifact level, assuming that it is similar to other artifacts by 15% at plus 15, and then you are going to get an extra 1% based on whatever number of artifacts you actually end up having. This artifact skill effect can only be applied to one hero within a team. This one's really not good for Arunka, and honestly, I don't even really think this is a PvP artifact at all. This feels like a PvE artifact. This feels like something like Card of Small Miracles or the Super Duper Water Gun Shooter. Those artifacts are largely used to help specific hunt compositions or PvE compositions meet specific damage thresholds if your gear is not good enough. So if you pick one of these up, it might be good to throw on like a Mui, for example, for your Wyvern team. Or you might use it every once in a blue moon for like Hall of Trials on like Kitty Clarissa, for example. But otherwise, yeah, I don't really think that this artifact is that good. If you're going to play Arunka on an artifact at all, you can use your Uberius' Tooth that you may have pulled off of Hwayoung if you don't want to use her post-nerf. That is definitely an option. Little Queen's Huge Crown is definitely one of the best ones you can choose. It increases single target damage a lot, and it really punishes opponents that have barriers, which really synergizes well with Arunka and her kit overall. And then obviously Merciless Glutton is a different variation of Little Queen's Huge Crown. It is obviously, again, something that boosts single target damage. And if you get a kill, you'll get a little bit of combat readiness push there as well. So that is decent. So I think those are going to be the three to look out for. Tooth is probably going to be the best, with Little Queen's Huge Crown being the second best. As far as sets go, attack set is probably going to be the best one on paper if you have a really good one laying around. It's very similar to Senya and Hwayoung. Stats are going to be the major thing, the thing that matters the most. So you're going to be choosing sets that give high amounts of stats. So either speed or attack feel like they're going to be the best ones. Obviously, destruction gives the most amount of stats, but that has literally zero synergy with Arunka, so we're not going to be choosing that. I could see maybe counter being a thing for some of you Banshee gamers, but I'm not really sold on it, especially because you can't really get that follow-up on the S1. It's probably going to end up being, like I said, the speed set or the attack set for most of you watching this video. With Arunka and her little review and her artifact done now, let's move on to talking about everything else in the patch. So the next thing I want to talk about are these new equipment sets, as well as the improvement to the Unity set. These, I think, will have some impact on the PvP metagame, so therefore I actually do want to take a little bit of time to talk about them. The first new set that we're going to be getting is the Protection set. It is acquired via Golem, and it is a 4-piece set. At the start of battle, grants a barrier equivalent to 12% of the caster's max health to all allies for 2 turns. I actually think that this is a fairly good set, despite the fact that we now have Arunka, Operator Secret, and Desert Jewel Bazaar being ways to punish barriers, and 2 of them are highly played right now. The fact that Protection set is a secret and your opponent doesn't actually know that you have it until you're in the battle is the biggest boon to the actual set. Because in the past, a character like, say, Fallen Cecilia is very obviously a barrier character. If I pick Troublemaker Crozet, am I on counter set, or am I on speed set, or am I on protection set? And this doesn't necessarily have to be just a tank, for example. You can have this on any character, basically. If you have like Apocalypse Ravi on protection set and it has like really good offensive stats and really high health and everything like you normally would, then maybe that's a possibility. I'm just throwing out the most extreme example. You could have a Shu, for example, on protection set. As long as it has the right stats to accomplish the job, it is a high health character. You will get a massive barrier at the start of the fight. So anytime you are playing against a high health character and your opponent has an aggressive team, they have to be thinking, does this team actually have a protection set? Like, what's the highest health character? Is it going to end up having protection set? So again, I think that is the biggest boon of the set. And I do think that it is a fairly good set overall. If you are playing characters that are primarily only used versus cleave, this might be a fairly good option for you. For example, like maybe a Rem on protection set might be something that you would consider. Whatever characters you're thinking about playing into aggro characters, it's worth considering picking up a protection set for them, assuming it doesn't impact their performance or their stats too badly. I am pretty high on the set overall. I think that it is a lot better than people are giving it credit. And even though I basically kind of like hinted at that it's going to get dumpstered by the aforementioned 2 ML5 stars in the Arunka we just talked about, I do still think that it has a place somewhere in the meta. And that is largely because of the mind game of them knowing or not knowing whether or not you have protection set. Think of it much like the Selene artifact, where they might not know if it was high attack or stealth. Obviously, they can look at it in game now with the hourglass. By clicking that in the top left, you could see the EE. But the mind game was there for a little bit when people weren't more aware of that actual tactic. I feel like this is going to be very much the same with protection set. If you are playing against people who you don't normally play against, they may not know if you have protection set or not. And if you just keep switching it up on them, it could be a very, very powerful tool. So I don't think that people should write this set off as far as PvP is concerned. It definitely will have some applications at some point throughout the course of a season. Again, barrier is still a strong mechanic. Just because there are ways to punish it doesn't mean that it's any less strong. That's why they are trying to punish barrier mechanics. I just wish that they waited on a character like Arunka a little bit longer, like I said earlier in the video, before they decided to basically sell you the counter to it. The next set here is the Torrent set, which drops from Katie's. It is a 2-piece set. it decreases the health of the person wearing it by 10%, and when attacking, increases damage dealt by 10%. Most of the time, I feel like you're going to want to use Penetration Set on most of your characters over Torrent. However, Torrent is a set that works on AoE characters, whereas Penetration Set only works on single target attacks. So to me, in my head, Torrent Set is a set you're going to want to use on characters that are basically very aggressive AoE characters. Think of things like Green Vildred, for example, or Blue Edda. These are the kinds of characters that come to mind when I think of Torrent Set. This is for the aggro and the cleave players specifically. I think they're the kinds of players that really want to use Torrent Set. I think that it is a good set, but I'm not sure how good it actually is, because a lot of times you're going to be giving up like the critical hit chance set to make the stats work or the math work for a lot of characters to get this one up and going. It's going to depend really on your quality of gear, but I do think that this is a very strong set for aggressive and cleave players overall. Again, to me, in my head, the easiest way for me to think about it is it's just AoE penetration set most of the time. Although, as far as I'm aware, this does stack, so there's probably some really kooky and crazy build where you play like 6 Torrent Set for an absolute massive amount of damage. What character that is or what that looks like, I don't really know, because I am not typically an aggressive player. The other thing that I want to talk about here is the change to Unity Set here. So Unity Set is now going to be a 8% dual attack chance increase, up from 4%. And the reason for this is because the basic dual attack chance and maximum dual attack chance were changed with this patch. So instead of having 5% dual attack chance on all characters, it is now 3%, which sounds good on paper because you're going to have less dual attacks. But all that really means is that when you finally do get hit by an enemy dual attack, it's going to be that much more frustrating because it's that much more unlikely. The maximum dual attack chance now, it used to be 20%. It now increases to 30%. So if you wear the 3-piece Unity Set here, like so you wear 6 Unity, and then you have the 3% chance, that is a 27% chance to dual attack, as opposed to 20% max in the past. There are obviously things like Rosa Hargana and characters like Terranor Guard who obviously get bonus dual attack chance for existing. And then you have like oddball things like Red Tenebria has dual attack chance in her imprints. Overall, this is probably going to make it so either people are more or less frustrated with dual attacks. I'm not really sure which one it's going to be, but I do think that this puts Unity Set in a much better light. I already felt that Unity Set was one of the most underrated sets in the game, and I myself have been starting to farm Unity Set because there are certain characters on Unity Set that are absolutely backbreaking. If you watched my Emperor account review, I talked about how great counter set Mediator Koeric felt for me all season, and I wish that he was counter Unity to really maximize the amount of chances I had to get an S1 in a game, because getting 3 or 4 of those S1s usually meant that I won the game outright. I would probably play Unity Set on a character like Mediator Koeric, and I think it's incredibly potent on a character like Archdemon Shadow as well. Counter Unity Archdemon Shadow, to me, on paper, feels like the optimal way to play the character. So seeing Unity Set get a buff and the base dual attack chance go down means that characters that really want to leverage their S1, like your Mediator Koerics, like your Archdemon Shadows, really want Unity Set now more than ever. So I do think that this is a good change. It puts Unity in a much better spotlight, and dual attack chance is still a very powerful mechanic. It can decide games randomly. You can win or lose games based on dual attack chances. And now that the base chance is much lower and you have a 2-set piece that will drastically increase that rate, when you think about it, right, before you would use Unity and you would have a 9% dual attack chance, 5 base, 4 from the set. Now you have a 3% base and an 8% chance on top of it, so you have 11%. So you have a better chance of dual attacking with the new Unity Set as opposed to the old mechanic plus the old Unity Set. So I do think that Unity Set stonks are definitely on the rise, that's for sure. And lastly, I want to talk about World Arena's Battle Frenzy effect changes in this video, because they're honestly pretty crazy. Pretty much one change in particular is really insane to me, and I can't believe they actually did it. So let's read the bullet points. The following battle frenzy effects will be applied, starting with the current preseason. I guess they forgot the letter B there. Base effect, depending on battle frenzy level, no change. 30% damage reduction effect, depending on elemental advantage, Covenant heroes only, no change. So you still get the damage reduction if you're attacking into the wrong element. Final speed increase by 7 for Soul Weavers is now removed. Final speed increase by 7 for mages is added. The last change here is maximum battle frenzy level decreases from 8 turns to 7 turns. So basically that's like saying that the battle frenzy will increase slightly faster than it has in the past. The biggest thing to harp on here is final speed increase by 7 for mage added. Why, oh why did you do this? The reason why 7 speed for Soul Weavers was fine is because Soul Weaver is the slowest class in the game on average. It is very difficult for most of the Soul Weavers in the game to actually take a turn in a reasonable time frame without them being built insanely bulky. You kind of remedy this by changing the Soul Weaver Zodiac symbols to give them more base speed, so that way they're more in line with knights, and therefore they might have a better chance of actually taking a turn. Mages, on the other hand, are mid-speed units, and some of them used to be some of the best speed openers in the entire game before they were outclassed by things like Conqueror Lilius, Ran, and Peyra. We already have mages like Araminta that can run around at 290 speed. I don't think that she needed 7 more speed. There are other characters like Fairy Tail Tenebria who used to be incredibly debilitating openers that now are just going to be getting 7 speed. Angel of Light Angelica is going to be getting 7 speed for this season. And there's just a whole slew of other ones. Arya, the way that she is played in like Legend RTA, is like 265, 270 speed already. Can you imagine playing a single target team into a 280 speed Arya? That feels really, really obnoxious for the most part. Don't forget also Basar. Basar was one of the best characters to open with ever. He has a really, really strong S3. Full strip with unbuffable, great for proccing Abyssal Crown. One of the biggest reasons why Basar doesn't see any play is his speed stat. He has the same stat line as Archdemon Shadow. So very high attack, very, very high bulk when you look at him compared to other mages. Again, speed is the biggest problem with him. Giving him 7 speed means that he realistically might come back into the meta, and it might be just an absolute headache to play up against the character. In this same patch, we are also seeing a buff to top model Luluka, making her more like Closer Charles. One of the biggest things that differentiated them was that Closer Charles was an AoE attack starter, whereas top model Luluka was a non-attack starter. So based on the enemy team composition, you could choose whichever one was more appropriate. Enemy has a bunch of counter skills, you play Luluka. Enemy has Politis or Celine, then you play Charles. Giving top model Luluka 7 speed kind of just blows Closer Charles out of the water. Top model Luluka just becomes like the better pick almost every single time because she is so much faster now and accomplishes much of the same goals and still has that crazy single target damage potential. I really don't understand this one. Mages historically have been some of the best characters in all of PvP. It's like between warriors and mages. Like this is like essentially like buffing, like I said, the best class. Like why did you need to give more of the best stat to the best class, or at least one of the best classes? Because again, traditionally, the characters that are very strong are like bruiser warriors or mages that can hold to Hegel's Ancient Book because they can hold to Hegel's. And giving the class that can hold to Hegel's more speed, to me, just sounds like a recipe for disaster. I really do think with these changes, we're going to be going into the fastest, most aggressive World Arena format that we've ever seen. And I think that the game needs to slow down a lot more rather than speed up. So I'm very puzzled by these changes. If you think that I'm wrong, please let me know down in the comments below. I really want to hear other people's opinions on the World Arena Battle Frenzy changes. As somebody who primarily likes to play turn 2, this just feels nightmarish because it feels like I'm going to have to reconfigure my box in such a way that I'm going to be forced to play a lot of very aggressive mages and play a very aggressive playstyle in order for me to compete. But again, I could be wrong. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe this is a bit of hyperbole. If so, again, would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And that is going to pretty much do it for my 2 cents on this video on Arunka and everything else in the patch. There are a number of other really awesome quality of life changes coming this patch, like the background battling, but I don't really want to spend too much time in this video talking about because it would just be going on forever. Custom group summons come back this week. My previous video on which character you should choose for custom group summons is probably going to be a little bit outdated, but for the most part, most of the information in there is going to be up to date. The Moonlight 5-star selector that we're going to be getting starting tomorrow, and you have to wait, I believe it's like 3 weeks, 21 days or so before you can choose the character. I will have a video helping you guys decide which one to take for that. I have already recorded most of it. It should be coming out tomorrow, Thursday, October 27th. So please do look forward to that. Hopefully that will be something that will be very, very useful to all of you. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later now.